Welcome to the Village Boy podcast. This is part three, and I think the last of the segment in the Black Boycott series. We've talked about the history of the ADOS and the FBAs. We've talked about the disconnection because the immediate reaction is just boycott, but underneath all of that is a vast network of disconnection. And so the Village Boy, as we do on this platform, we just don't look at the excitement or the narrative that's happening. The target is Black businesses. Let the people with the resource, the wealth, the money, boycott Black businesses. So Black on Black crime, Black on Black violence, Black on Black hatred. But as somebody I've been following for so long, the last couple of years, I've been following his teachings. And one thing you could say is nobody has listened to him, because if they did listen to him, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having these conversations right now. We're having these conversations because nobody listened to Dr. Claude Anderson, an amazing brain. These are the people that we need to listen to, but we're listening to ADOS family folks, people that are filled with ignorance, hatred, and divide. Divide and conquer is an old-time tool that has never worked. I gave an example in the second episode that when the Haitians were fighting for their freedom and liberation against the French, who had kept them in captivity, America made sure that American slaves, American Black people do not hear or know of the Haitian revolt, because that would have given them hope. And everything that the Americans needed was hope, to understand that if they can do it, we can do it. And we see Haiti suffer today because of that protection that America had to keep its slaves in check. And today, ADOS people are insulting other sets of ADOS people who are Haitians. Those are ADOS people too. American descendants of slaves. They're from the continent of North America. So we had this conversation in part two. If you missed it, go back to part two and watch it. It's pretty lengthy. This video is not going to be as long as the part two. It's because the part two was the body. Part one was trying to understand what is ADOS and what is FBA. Part two, the divide. Why are we having this conversation when there are things that we can do to better ourselves? Part three, lessons learned, if any. Let's listen to the great Dr. Claude Anderson. I could spend days and days listening to this man talk. You're not going to see me spend time with ADOS rhetoric, because his hatred and division and terrorist-like narrative. He adds no value, and it has not been able to build any community. So, my people, I present to you Dr. Claude Anderson.
Businesses, the farm. So in the course of the civil rights movement, the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. Now, Black folks will be going into that underclass structure starting in about another 2 years.
And he's talking about inappropriate behavior, correct? He's essentially talking about inappropriate behavior. And what is the meaning of inappropriate behavior?
You got, we got, all of us got about 2 years to either get our act together or hang it up. If we don't do some very specific things in that next 2-year period, we will not get out of it, and the window is going to close on us. Now, what's going to drive us into this underclass structure? First of all, are the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism. We're still bearing the burdens and the scars. They were never corrected. That's one of the failings of our leadership in this country. They had the nerve, the audacity to let black folks suffer for 460 years. And at the end of the civil rights movement, rather than going back and saying, let's find out what has happened to black folk for 460 years. Have they been psychologically, emotionally, politically, educationally damaged? Nobody spent 1 minute of time trying to figure out what had happened to black folk over all that period of time. So in the course of the civil rights movement, at the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. And now let's go seek integration and pretend that we're all equal.
And when you look at some of this rhetoric, it tells you exactly to the point that he's trying to make, that nobody has addressed the pain, trauma, disconnect that foundational African Americans and descendants of slaves went through. Nobody. They just cut the chains off one day and said you were free. And so if you're carrying this level of pain and trauma on your shoulders, and you see some of the person that looks like you but does not have your lived experience succeed, it's bound to not be acceptable. And so I can understand the pain and frustration, right? It's misplaced, but I can understand the pain and frustration because my people went through all of this, right? This problem is happening in South Africa. South Africans have suffered and went through apartheid and all the stuff that the white folks perpetrated on the black South Africans, who made up the majority. At least the foundation of blacks were the minority, but the South Africans were the majority in their own country. And when they let them loose, cut the chains off and say, okay, now you're free, other Africans were moving into South Africa: Nigerians, Zimbabweans, Zambians, Kenyans, Cameroonians, Ugandans were moving into South Africa and enjoying this freedom that, from the perception of things, was meant for the black South Africans. And the black South Africans, like the black Americans, didn't really take kindly to that. Again, we're not speaking about everybody. We're having a conversation. And that's when we saw the xenophobia in South Africa. And we are seeing the xenophobia manifest itself now in America and the black boycott business. It's exactly the same thing. And this is what Dr. Claudette is saying, that when you have not catered to the people's pain and trauma and given them the tools and resources for which they're willing to compete, they're coming to compete with people that have no trauma, no pain. That is their pain, but the people look like them. And so when stuff starts going right for those people that have no pain and trauma, these other people with pain and trauma are going to pick on them. It is carefully curated and planned.
Now, that was grossly unfair, because by that point in time, and by the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites controlled almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were 1-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what? And that's what's happening in South Africa right now, where you have black folk now who have been totally subjected to the most brutal form of legal and economic slavery around the world for almost 300 years in South Africa, where whites in South Africa control almost 100% of all the gold mines, the diamond mines, the chrome, the bauxite, the magnesium, the land, the businesses, the farms, the animals. And now in South Africa, they've been told that they're free. Now, anybody in his right mind would have said, hold it a second. Now, if there's been a reform in South Africa, since whites have gotten everything and blacks got nothing, you should have seen on the news a massive flux of whites trying to get out of South Africa. If there's going to be any significant real change, wouldn't you agree? Somebody would have been trying to get out of there. The airports would have been jammed.
And on the Village Boy, we've talked about what he just said at length when we were doing the South African land reform. We talked about this. If they're taking lands from South Africans, white South Africans, they would be running out of there. They're not, that is the power and the might of resources. And when Team Black says they want our resources, they cannot want something that you don't have. It's what Dr. Claude just said. Blacks have nothing. They have a purchasing power because, like everybody else, they have the ability to work in the richest economy and harness that purchasing power, 46 million people strong. So yes, but it's not because you own or control any levels of government, any resources that has to pass through Black control. So Dr. Claude is spot on when he talks about access control. One of the biggest things that any community has to have is control to resources, or at least control to power. White South Africans still own both. The day they would lose any one of them, they would leave South Africa. They still own control of power. They put the Black figureheads there, Zuma, all of these people, and they still own the resources. And that's why they're not leaving South Africa. They give crumbs and say, go play with this. We still run the show from behind the scene.
And you all haven't heard of Pete. You know why? Because nothing is changing. Because in South Africa, the dominant, arrogant white society that's been so brutal to Black folks still owns and controls 100% of all the gold mines, diamond mines, silver mines, chrome, bauxite. And they're telling those South Africans, you can now compete. And that's the problem in Black America. We've been told now that we can compete, and I say, well, with what? And by going into our underclass structure, going to be 7 converging factors going to push us. To get my little summary up. 1, we're going to have an increased amount of conservatism in the country, and I'm going to talk about conservatism in a few minutes.
He said this about 15 years ago. I can't remember the date. And today in 2025, America is so conservative. He said this. I mean, his timelines may have been plus or minus off, but America is super conservative today. Let's listen to the next point.
2, we're going to have a massive unending influx of immigrants into the
Has there been a massive unending influx of the Democrats opened the borders and let everybody in, 25 million people? He said this 11, 12, 13, 14 years ago. That was the second point. The first point was America is going to become more conservative. America is more conservative today. There's going to be a massive influx of immigrants. The question now is, where are these immigrants coming from? If they're Hispanics, if they're Indians, but you must create levels of protection for yourself. You must create partnerships so that you can join forces with somebody to conquer somebody else. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, that type of mentality. And for me, I may be naive, but in a country where the competition is all about resources as America, if Black people are seeing other Black people come into the country, you want to capture those Black people and put on your team. and say, play on my team, play by my rules, play by my ability, play on my team so my numbers grow so I can fight the other enemy. You're not really my friend, but you're my partner. I respect you as a partner, and you're going to stay on my team so we can fight. I'll get a lot of the resources and I'll give you some of the resources because it's a numbers game. And if I don't have the numbers, I cannot compete. Now, I can't trust the Latino. I can't trust the Asian. I can't trust the European. The only other person I should be able to trust is the Black African. And how do I have the Black African trusting me? I use the emotional lever of, well, we came from you, you are from us, and we try to move this agenda forward.
Country are going to push us down. We have been the number 2 population in America now for over 460 years. We're going to get kicked out of being number 2 and going down to number 3.
He said this 11, 12, 13 years ago. Today, the Black American population is number 3. You can listen to this or you may not listen to this. It's the truth. The Black American population is number 3. Mexicans are not number 2. Guatemalans are not number 2. El Salvadorians are not number 2. Colombians are not number 2. Hispanics, Latinos are number 2. A coalition of people are number 2. They didn't distinguish themselves. They didn't separate themselves. They are number 2. And they're growing at a rate that Black people are not going to be able to keep up with. They have given you means and ways to reduce your population. The liberal Democrat propaganda has given you that tool, the ability. Love who you love, marry who you marry. Don't keep a baby, your choice. These are all tools that have reduced your population significantly. And more Black women are going to school and getting a degree. And the more women get degrees, the lesser they are having children. And the single woman epidemic has caught the Black family, totally affecting their reproductive capacity. So the Black family has been hit hard. And there's a large segment of Black people fighting each other instead of coming together to be able to have the numbers to compete in a resource-tight economy.
When are we going to go down to number 3? We're going to go down to number 3 in less than 2 years. Now, when I wrote my book about 4 or 5 years ago, Hispanics at that time were 9% of the population. They've now moved in 6 years from 9% up to 11%. Blacks were 12.3% 6 years ago. They're still at 12.3%. Now you got a Hispanics at 11 and Blacks at 12.3. According to the Census Bureau 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., they anticipate Hispanics passing Blacks right on time, as I had predicted.
I have a question. Blacks are 12.3%. When the Census Bureau does a Black survey, are they counting everybody in America that identifies as Black, which means foundation, ADOS, Africans, Caribbeans, everybody? So in that number, what is the true representation of the FBAs? If they have been 12% and now they're including the immigrants that came from outside to still hold that number at 12.3%. So what is the actual number of pure FBAs? Let me sound like a clansman, pure blood FBAs. What is it? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? And the immigrants make up what? 2%? Or is the Census Bureau not factoring immigrants in that census? Immigrants are added and they still cannot keep up the number. Is it time to ask ourselves that what the hell are we doing?
Now, Wall Street Journal on the left-hand column 2 weeks ago, on the left-hand side of the page, I can send it to you if you want, it says that when Hispanics passed black people, at that time, the whole political structure would shift gears. There'd be a power shift in America. That nobody's going to go to black folk to ask them anything anymore because you're no longer the dominant minority population. They're already preparing for this. They're already creating all kinds of major programs around the country where they would go and check with Hispanics about anything they want to know about minorities. Black folk would get their information through the Hispanic Society.
So for black folks, fortunately enough, this has not happened. In the last election, Trump was still pushing aggressively to win over the black vote. The Democrats are still heavily dependent on their black vote, and why guys like Team Black and myself have been pushing to get black people off the Democrat plantation, because they have kept them over there for over 60 plus years and haven't given them nothing back in return. And instead for black folks to be mad at the Democrats and boycott the Democrat Party for holding them hostage, they are picking a fight with a less powerful structure who were African Americans or African immigrants that migrated to America like every other person migrated to America. So they still value and they still seek the counsel of black people in America. But looking at the numbers and understanding that politics is a game of numbers and a game of interest, how long, if blacks are not willing to grow their numbers, will they become an insignificant part of America where the Hispanics and Latinos are going to be the deciders and the Asians are going to come third, and the blacks and the less of the colored rainbow coalitions are going to be fighting for what's left?
Then by the year 2005, the Asians are going to pass black folk. Then you're going to get kicked from being number 3 down to number 4. At that point in time, you're locked in and frozen because everything you need will have to pass through those 2 groups. And those 2 groups do not have your interest at heart. They don't understand your problems and don't care about it. If you can't compete, they're going to say that's tough. And so what we're going to try to do today in dealing with just that one issue, as well as conservatism and the problems of technology in America that's also going to make us push us in the underclass, is to teach you how to compete. We got to understand we got these problems, but you got to understand where the problems came from. And I want to give you a real fast education today, because the real clue to liberation is not only education, it's re-education. And that's
in black. And your lady that was talking, and every other ADOS and FBA propagandists, education and re-education. These are the tools to compete, not gatekeeping, not holding on something that, if you really look at it, doesn't even belong to you. Not hiding values that need to be put in museums, displays for everybody to see and understand the history and legacy. If you gatekeep, you're not writing a history about it. People don't know about it. And that's why education and re-education on the ability to compete must be taught in black schools, to understand that you have to go out, not inwards. You have to go out and conquer the world. Black Americans need to conquer Africa, not run away from Africa, not shy away into projects and ghettos and places that will not help you develop and keep you into internal consumers. Dr. Claude says education and re-education. Very powerful.
That's what we're going to talk about this morning. I'm going to show you how we got into our dilemma and how we must get out of it. Nothing has happened to black folk by accident. Everything that's happened to you has been systematically programmed through what I call social engineering. You are a victim of historical social engineering. Now let's go back and start dealing with some of these issues. And a lot of this, what you also find covered in my book, Black Labor, White Wealth, and the other 2 books I got coming out this year. One is called Dirty Little Secrets, and the big one is called Powernomics. How do you do it? And Powernomics, if you want to know what Powernomics is, because I'm going to talk about it a little later, Powernomics is teaching my people how a new way of seeing, thinking, and behaving. And that's what the whole thing will be about this morning. You got to change the way you're seeing and thinking and behaving. Why? Because I said we've been locked into an underclass structure. because we got two major problems in America. One problem is that maldistribution of wealth and resources I told you about that's in South Africa and America, where whites own and control everything. That's your number one problem. The second problem we're going to talk about this morning is the inappropriate behavior pattern of black folk. Those are the only two problems you have. I don't care what anybody else talks about.
The inappropriate behavior of black folks. Let that sink in. Please absorb that and make it what you will, but the inappropriate behavior of black folks. That does not mean dancing in the streets naked. That's not what he's talking about. But when we came out of the 2024 election where Trump won, immediately the conservatives had a black fatigue narrative that ran on social media. Black fatigue. People were just generally tired of black folk. Black fatigue, black fatigue. There were episodes, Candace Owens, all the black puppet conservative commentators, the racist Charlie Kirk did an episode on black fatigue. But what was black fatigue? Black fatigue was essentially inappropriate behavior. But not one person was boycotting all of those things. That was disrespectful. Saying you're fatigued of a segment of your population. Nobody woke up to do a boycott. There was not a boycott of white America, white conservative America. That's inappropriate behavior that he's talking about.
In America, it's not worthwhile wasting your time. The problem in America is not drug abuse, crime, low-income housing, public housing, food stamps, welfare, teenage pregnancy. Those are symptoms of a problem. The symptoms are the fact that you don't own and control anything to run you and control your lives.
Did Tim Black hear that? You don't own or control anything. That's the problem. You do not own or control anything. You have no resources to your name. You have access to nothing, no levers of powers. You control no branches of government. You do not even control the Democrat Party that kneels and begs you. You do not control them. Absolutely nothing is under your control. You don't have resources. Resources are for those that control and make decisions. But you have a strong buying power. You are a consumer.
That's the problem. And the second thing is inappropriate behavior pattern. And before I get into the inappropriate behavior patterns, let me define that for you. Now, I'm in current day terms, I might call it the Rodney King syndrome. It's pretty familiar to most of you. That's when somebody pulls you out of a car, breaks your jaw, breaks 3 ribs, cracks 2, knocks out 2 teeth, gives you a concussion, breaks your wrist, breaks your kneecap, and stomps you, and you say, why can't we all get along? That is inappropriate.
Did you hear inappropriate behavior? It's not no boycott. That's inappropriate behavior. That's inappropriate behavior. Asking for a boycott for African businesses, when they have not in any ways hurt you, they are supposed to be a partner with you, is inappropriate behavior. Calling other Black Africans because you call yourself Black American and see yourself as a superior Black race is inappropriate behavior. You cannot win with inappropriate behavior.
Or if I'm in Detroit, Michigan, when I was there functioning as assistant police commissioner during the riots, and I was working on riot possibilities and techniques in the city, I get a call down by some people who had been involved in a couple of murders. And he said, look, I didn't have anything to do with it, Anderson. I just there, I witnessed it. I said, what happened? Well, you see, they'd had a disturbance in Detroit, Michigan. And the police broke into a motel and found 2 Black boys in there with some white girls. And they didn't like that, even though they were in a Black neighborhood. They had paid for the room. It was their right and privilege to be wherever they wanted to be. It was between them and God. But the police officers were white. They were very disturbed about this. So what they did, they took those two boys on a Friday, and they beat them all day Friday. They beat them all day Saturday. Then by Sunday, they had gotten tired of beating them. They said, well, we just go ahead and kill them. And so one of the officers picked up a rifle, and hit the oldest black kid in the back of the head with a rifle. The kid was only about 22 years of age. Hit him so hard that it knocked one eye completely out of socket and bulged the other eye and broke the rifle stock. And the poor kid fell on his knees and crawled around and found the broken stock of the rifle, and on his knees held it up and apologized for having a hard head. That is inappropriate behavior. The question should have been, why are you brutalizing me and killing me? What have I done to you? And so that's the kind of inappropriate behavior. It's what we've been systematically programming to displaying as black folk in a very highly competitive society. So what I want you all to start thinking about today and all throughout my speech.
In a very highly competitive society, that's what we said. But people like Team Black and ADOS defenders would want you to think that America is not a highly competitive society. America is a very, very, very ultra highly competitive society. The dominant white structure has owned and controlled for the longest time, and they've settled on like 60% of the resources. 40% is up for grabs. Other communities are coming and pushing and making inroads because it's very competitive. Nobody has time to get or pander or kiss anybody's ass. It's a competitive society. But every time you hear ADOS and a small group of FBAs talk, they always talk about gatekeeping. Let's shadow this. Let's cover this. It's our culture. Let's not share with the world. Let's keep this for ourselves. This belongs to us. We don't want to share it. We don't want to do this. We don't want to be part of this. We don't want to be part of that group.
Speech today is not who you're against, but who you're for. I want you to understand that you're in a very highly competitive situation. You're going to be competing to survive and prosper. And that's what racism is all about. Contrary to what anybody tells you, and I just saw a definition of racism in the Washington Post last week by a noted columnist who's a conservative. And what he was really talking about was prejudice and discrimination. He wasn't talking about racism, but he was mystifying the word. That's why I finally figured out why he's always on the wrong side of an issue relating to black folk. He thinks that a black person can be racist. A black person cannot be a racist. Racism is a power relationship between groups of people. That's all it is. It means where one group of people have control of so much wealth and power and resource that it can deprive, hurt, and injure and exploit another group to benefit itself. Never in the history of this earth have black folk ever controlled that much resources and where they can have gone out of their way to exploit, injure, and do something to whites. So therefore, racism only started in the 16th century when he began to commercialize slavery against blacks. That's when racism started. There was no such thing as racism before that. The other thing, and before I get into my presentation, you got to understand racism also comes from the word race. Race means group. So whenever you hear people talking about now, you cannot prove racism because somebody fired you from a job, they are absolutely right. And the power structure and all the white think tanks in Washington know that. That's why you can no longer prove racism, because racism does not apply to an individual. It applies to a group. And because I discriminate against you, that's individual, that's personal. It's not group-based. And so you can no longer prove group-based discrimination. The second thing about the word race, remember also, which is very important for our discussion today, is the word race means being in competition. See, they didn't pick house, tree, car. They said racism. Race means being where people are competing from here to there. And we are in competition. That's what racism means. Black people must learn how to compete or survive, or not compete and perish.
The FBA crew and ADOS people, did you hear that? Black people must learn to compete and survive, or not compete and perish. Destroying another person's business is not competition, where it's an angle of competition in there. Boycotting another person's business is not competition, is what I wanted to say. Competition is understanding that we can be partners, or I could learn from you, or I could bring you into my camp and we can work together, or I can learn from you and use the resources that I have to be bigger, to take something that you have and make it bigger. A woman in Maryland opened a hair braiding shop and turned it into a hair braiding factory, and that's the crux, the root of all of this boycott. People were not happy that an African American woman, because she is an American citizen, was able to open up a hair braiding shop that goes for 24 hours, hires 400 Black women, and can sit 150 people at a given. Instead of celebrating the intelligence, the ingenuity of this woman, the creativity, and saying, how can we have that from Maryland? And she's based in a majority high middle class Black community, which is Prince George's County, Maryland. Instead of celebrating this milestone, achieving, bringing this milestone together and saying, how can we work together? How can we explore this? What other things can we add to own this market? And from there, you can now take the Asian beauty product stores, because she's beginning to organize an ecosystem that can compete with the Asian business stores, the Asian beauty stores. You can now partner and say, we're going to be your suppliers. You're going to look at us. We're going to be your suppliers. You don't look at the Asians. The price is going to be right. You already have the lion's share of the market. We recreate the business, recreate the structures. No, what did that create? We created enmity, envy within the ADOS radical portions of the FBA group. And they're calling from August 1st for the boycott of Black African-owned businesses. Black people are calling for boycotting other Black people's businesses. But they're not going to say we are boycotting other Black people's businesses. They're going to say we are boycotting African businesses, because first, you must accept that they are not Black, and second, they're beneath you. Those two matrix are the only reasons that would allow you boycott another Black person's business. Every time somebody says African to describe somebody, it's usually not in a positive term. Like I said, this video was not meant to be long. We can do a fourth episode if it's getting the attention, but I wanted to touch on this in a way that only the Village Boy can. We're not reacting to the little back and forth. We don't do that. The platforms like Team Black's platforms and other platforms can do that. We try to understand a problem, the root cause of the problem itself, and solutions to the problem, because we're always going to give you solutions. The solutions is that Black Americans and Black Africans and Black people across the world must come out of their comfort zones to work together. $1.2 trillion worth of purchasing power is too much power to not network with each other. It doesn't stop you with networking with other people, but you must network with each other. your host for the Village Boy, Shreds. Good night and good luck.